In all the world, tech projects are recognized as most effective way to accelerate the development of economy. Governments develop various support tools for such businesses, implement digital support that make lives of tech entrepreneurs easier, provide support to businesses, and reduce risks for private capital and long-term projects. What principles are in the basis of the Russian platform of similar support for businesses? Do perspectives of the government and development institutions and private businesses are the same? Let's discuss that right now at this session. From startup to exit, platform for accelerated development of businesses. I invite to the stage, to your applause, participants of this discussion. Let's find Igor Drozdov from the SKOLKOVO Foundation, SKOLKOVO Foundation Chairman of the Board. Oleg Teplov, Web Ventures CEO. Rustam Tikhonov, Ministry of Economic Development of the Russian Federation, Head of Department for Strategic Development and Innovation. Vyacheslav Shulenin, CEO of MEDTECH.MOSCOW. Sergey Protas, Head of Strategy and M&A of SITRONICS Group. Dmitrii Shcherbinin, from federal government. Leonid Osipov, Managing Director for Tech Development and Innovation of VEB.RF. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Welcome to our session yesterday. It was cool, so people wanted to wear warm clothes, but today it's much nicer, it's much warmer, it's nice to work outdoors. We have very little time, so let's get to the business. We have 45 minutes, so we have many issues to discuss. Our session is called From Startup to Exit. I would like to welcome our speakers. Briefly, let me reiterate, Dmitrii Shcherbinin, Deputy Head of the First Vice Premier, Mr. Belousov, Rustam Tikhonov, from the Ministry of Economic Development, from the Department for Strategic Development and Innovation, Igor Drozdov, SKOLKOVO Foundation Chairman of the Board, Sergey Protas, Head of Strategy M&A from SITRONICS Groups, and Vyacheslav Shulenin, CEO of MEDTECH.MOSCOW, but today in healthcare, but today he agreed to participate, being a syndicate co-founder, which is a venture club. So it will be mostly about that role. So colleagues, let's begin. Dmitrii, let me start with you. You were at the roots of creating a federal project for startups, and I heard about it firsthand. So what is the main idea of that project? And what conditions should be put in place for us to have new tech leaders in Russia? And I will be moderating, giving you 5 minutes strictly, and please follow this schedule. Good afternoon, friends. In fact, the government, especially in recent years, have been actively developing new initiatives, and it's no secret for a lot of you that last year, after a series of strategic sessions, we developed several initiatives for different sectors, for different spaces that should become breakthrough initiatives, and their results should be the results of the government and their activities. So we had a tech development block as part of those initiatives. Consequently, for technological development, several decisions were made to develop them, to implement specific, described and clear projects, beacons, as we call them, mostly related to driverless or pilotless transport, and then electric mobility and the use of data, of medical records on health conditions and using them for medical purposes. So those are industry vertical projects. Also in the tech sphere, several initiatives were developed for systemic support of tech companies from the very early stages, even before the companies are registered, when you have a team or a number of people there in place, and throughout the whole full life cycle from startup to its growth and all the way to exit, as we have, so until the exit, when they attract a strategic investor, or in some cases it can be an IPO. So in that life cycle of a startup, some measures were offered, and from the inside the government they seem to be numerous and active, but maybe from the outside they may seem to be something else. But I wanted to tell you about our ideology. There are some measures aimed at shaping teams, building teams, when people at different networking events meet each other, so they're drawn by the same idea, so they participate in accelerators. And besides well-known development institutions, we also have people from the national strategic initiatives. When startup is formed and it becomes a company, a business, then support measures come into play that help them grow from this newly formed, newly registered company to become a mature organization through subsidies, grants at early stages. And understandably, many startups don't even see government support measures, and they look for private investments. At the same time, the government sees more its role as being active, not just creating conditions, taxation, regulatory conditions, but also invest government funds or quasi-government funds into those initiatives. So there are some support measures there. I can name two of them. Grants for tech companies against developing products in line with the requirements from large customers, state-owned companies or large private companies. It doesn't matter if a product is interesting, but it should be further developed, so grant can be provided for that purposes, for those purposes, or and loans at preferential rates. So market rate is interest rate is quite high, so our preferential terms are quite attractive. And for mature tech companies, preferential simplified conditions may be provided for them to have an IPO. We talk about having that at a Moscow exchange. And there's a special section that exists there, and we're planning to simplify IPO process for them, and also to have a tech index at Moscow exchange to evaluate their tech level once they have an IPO. So those measures are put together. So there's this seamlessness about that. The idea is all those measures are related to each other from the perspective of rules, organizational conditions. So development institution that is involved interacts with them, and then they're related in terms of data exchange. So the idea is that tech companies receive some support measures, some services, and they get them not from scratch, but they accumulate a track record of successes and of data, which are taken into consideration when decision is made on investments and support measures by any development institution or an investor. I will not be taking time of others, so explaining how we share data with each other. I'm talking about development institutions. My colleagues will tell you about that, but generally the ideology of helping startups to go through all the way to IPOs or to exit. So it's a comprehensive nature of support measures and interconnections of all those measures. So that's the idea. Thank you very much. The idea is interesting, but how it can be implemented in real life, that is something else. I would like to discuss that. Rustam, you have a very non-standard, complicated objective. You're a brave person, goal-oriented. So Dmitrii described that project. So it mentions IT structures that maintain data on those who ask for support. So there's some official data banks, and there's some others, private ones. So what about the current status? What is the readiness of that IT system, and who should be able to use it going forward? What needs to be tolerated? Maybe there's some market demands from investors or market companies, and your general perspective on this IT system. Like Dmitrii said, it would be very nice to hear from you on this. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I have a presentation. I would like to share a few words about those principles of seamlessness, which are the basis when we develop IT systems, among other things. But we look at this issue broader, and it can be called a new paradigm of interacting of those institutions with tech entrepreneurs. First of all, we want to reduce administrative burden, reduce red tape when we work with innovative companies, and development institutions should have a chance to get the data about tech entrepreneurs, about patents that they have, about their revenues, and all the things which are part of the open data, what federal tax authorities have. Then we would like to have such a service that tech entrepreneurs would be able to get different types of support from various development institutions. It would be just as easy as it happens at SKOLKOVO ecosystem or within other development institutions. So they would not see different requirements in terms of writing to them, so they would need to rework and tell them everything from scratch. So from that perspective, we should accelerate the development of tech products that companies do, and without spending efforts on interacting with development institutions, or less effort should be spent on it. Of course, some interaction is needed every time, but we want it to simplify. We want it to be simplified. From our perspective, so this new approach should make our innovative ecosystem more open to investments, more understandable for investors, because those government funds which are used through grants and through investment phase, and innovative companies, they say they're not sufficient to scale their businesses fully, but we find some flexibility. In some places it is easier to get the funds, or it's easier to agree on better terms. So when we have something unique, something non-standard, then you cannot play with those government venture investments. So these are the three principles we keep in mind when we talk about seamlessness. from the perspective of how they can be practically implemented. So the first track to simplify access to development institution with government data is somewhat boring and bureaucratic, but we expect to adopt federal law next spring to facilitate access to the data. If it's open data, no approval or agreement is required from the entrepreneur.
If the data requires the authorization and agreement, the Institutes of Development of Technological Entrepreneurship will ask for this permission, and this is going to simplify the application for different services significantly. Of course, it's going to be done based on the infrastructure of the digital government, but I think this is technicality. We shouldn't stop on this. Secondly, development of unified database of the participants of the innovational ecosystem. For our mechanism of seamlessness to work. When we're working with a particular institute of development, it is easier to get different services within it, compared to when you are transferred from one to another, because the institute knows their contractor and partner, they have the instant records, how the company developed and what was possible for the team, what is the qualification of theirs, etc., etc. Thus, by providing new services, the Institute of Development has less time spent for checking the partner on the readiness of the service, on its readiness, etc. In order for us to have this dialogue as simple as it is simple inside one institute, we are making this database, and it's going to be hosted by Ministry of Economical Development. From this point of view, by requesting the information from the technological company, the institute gets the general info without revealing the commercial data. I will show you the structure later. So these services which were received by the company, by which Institute of Development, and the authorization by the technological entrepreneur, through that one institute might get a more detailed information on details and nuances of the work, thus simplifying the process of reception of the services for the company and to make it faster. We believe that this time factor is most critical for development of technologies. And third aspect is the creation of a shop window of startups. On one hand, here and now we have some developments which are being developed by us with the help of coordination center of the government. But in the future we will have a very good collaboration with VEB Group, NTE, ecosystem, and all the institutes of development which are present here and now. To take a look at how it looks schematically, we try to show it in such blocks visually. In a sense, we have this register through which the institutes of development will work. And the most important, we have the state informational contour present here, which is going to unload the burden from the technological entrepreneur from the point of view of informing the institutes of development on their state in different systems. Rospatent, Federal Ministry of Finances, etc. We have this matrix of agreements between the Institutes of Development on seamless cooperation. First of all, we needed to find agreement on what services can be received automatically, almost automatically, from the point of view of
информационного обмена.
Informational exchange on data about the companies, and in this case where the data would be more required,
Более детальный due diligence проходить.
and
Мы
due diligence would be more detailed. In general, we try to simplify the reception of services in regard to accelerational programs.
получением каких-то консультационных мер чуть
With regard to consultation measures, a bit more complicated is grant support.
вопросов
It all requires
бизнес-планов,
the representation of business plans, the projects, which have to be financed by the government.
более
And I think that
традиционно
most traditional,
это, конечно,
from the point of view of due diligence, most traditional stages are due diligence and the investment stages. The paychecks are different, and the complications of transactions are much more complicated compared to other measures of support. And this is the structure of the data, which will represent the register
каждый из
on each of the companies. Lots of rows, as you can see. Lots of things will be gathered from the state conta. Everything which is open source data.
Что-то будем запрашивать у Института развития.
Something will be requested from the Institutes of Development,
Соответственно, таким образом
and thus forming track record of each separate company, which will allow us in the future
гораздо проще и быстрее получать меры поддержки.
to get the measures of support much faster and easier for the technological entrepreneurs and to develop their technological business
Есть уже
through this approach. We already have some developments
фронт-энду, это
on front end of this environment,
сейчас достаточно интенсивно развивается.
which is developing
Мы
rather rapidly. Together with Web and Institutes of Development, we are testing it. We have various tabs in this info
как в целом
environment dedicated to
системы,
pulse of the innovational ecosystem. There is the heat map,
как распределение
regional heat map on distribution of the measures of support and companies. And there is also different cross-sections from the technological point of view
отраслей и
and areas of their activities
которые компании
and the forms of support which are provided to the companies. And I would like to say that one of the key difficulties was
общий язык
to create this
развития занимательных
common language
этапов
to classify the startups, ops,
описать одинаково компанию.
and to describe the company
Ключевая история для того, чтобы мы могли
using the same language.
четко описывать события.
This was a key factor which was required to describe the events in the ecosystem. Now we are developing this language together with the development of the info system itself. There are several tabs which were mentioned by Dmitrii.
Проектом
They are about the flagman
медицинской
projects, the unpiloted topics, the medical topics, the so-called beacon projects, and the separate tab on the state of the
скорость реакции институтов развития
seamlessness.
сервисов
Thus we will manage to check the speed
одних
of how the companies are transferring from one type of measures of support to other. For us, time
сервиса
of receiving the service by the technological company
технологическим
is becoming critical.
при высоком качестве.
Of course, the quality has to remain on good level as well. We're also developing the tab which is called the shopping window of startups. We are designing
Группа ВЭБ с институтом
it together with Web Group, with Institutes of Development. And it should be available to the private potential investors.
для того, чтобы
We're doing it in order to make sure
системы
that it's going to be simple for them to work with the innovation ecosystem, for them to be able to evaluate the objects of subjects of investments on a zero iteration And we believe that this is going to make the process
Процесс инвестирования
of
в
investments
стартапы,
into technological startups much easier,
наверное, если
especially for those which are mature enough. That's all in short. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Rustam.
Тривиальная задача очень легко доказали.
So once again, this is non-trivial task.
С архитектурой системы
You have shown the architecture
способности,
and a matrix of seamlessness.
чтобы не сильно запугать наших
Not to scare off the startuppers and our listeners, I would like to draw conclusions
системы.
about the system. First, we really hope that this system is going to help the startups and technological companies to get the measures of support faster. We hope that the main users of the system would be the investors, who will get access to the system, who will try to find the subjects of their investments, to find the companies which are going to be most interesting to them personally. The register is going to be based on all the information from all the institutes of development. We will agree with the investors later on, and we will ask what they think about our idea. Igor, I would like to give floor to you. First of all, happy birthday, Startup Village, 10 years. This is quite an age for startup. How exactly does the information from the companies get to this platform? And why actually does it need this informational system? Thank you for your question. Yes, Rustam has shown this shopping window of startups. SKOLKOVO is one of the main donors for the system which was mentioned by Rustam.
Написано было в презентации, что 10 тысяч компаний, информация о 10 тысяч компаний содержится. Вот половина из них это...
We have the information on 10,000 companies, and half of those are the information from SKOLKOVO.
Уже несколько лет назад
This shopping window of startup was an idea in making for 10 years. Initially, we didn't quite understand how exactly and is somebody going to use it. And for us, we had this internal task
компанией мы работали.
to see what companies we're working with, for it not to be manual, for it to be automated, more or less, and to provide it to the wide community if it is possible, to show what technologies exist in Russia, what companies are there. And we started filling in this system like this. This wasn't a manual process. If there are SKOLKOVO residents, you know that most of the dialogues with SKOLKOVO is digital. And of course, it leaves the digital footprints.
Компания подавала в фонд Сколково.
What was sent to SKOLKOVO Foundation, what was received from SKOLKOVO Foundation, everything is reflected inside our systems. And basically, the shopping window
Внутренних системах получено
shows some of the information received from startups
в частности
and other sources.
о патентах напрямую поступает.
Info about patents is coming from Rospatent.
Живой навигатор.
This is a live navigator.
Многие из вас увидели, а те, кто не...
I hope that you managed to see it. If you haven't, look at it. We have it on the website. This is the navigator SKOLKOVO. Even if you input it like this, you will find it. And online we have the info about all these SKOLKOVO companies. It's online indeed. The amount of companies can be seen there. Various technologies can be looked through there. You can see the card of the profile of the company, the description of the technology, the description of the level of the technological maturity of the company, which is also planned to be evaluated automatically and not manually,
Автоматизированная система анализа.
using various systems of analysis.
Компания получила грант на изготовление.
To showcase that, let's say the company is receiving the grant for the prototype, and it means that it's mature 4.5, they are ready to prepare the prototype, and this is a working system, as I see it. Who's going to use it? That's the question. As it's shown by the practice, the startups are using it, both who are in SKOLKOVO and who want to come to SKOLKOVO, because it's always useful to check the information if you want to be the resident, and some
Делает что-то уникальное.
companies are making
И в этом смысле полезно...
believe that they are making something unique and nobody is doing this, and it's useful to take a look at what exists among the colleagues. In some cases, it is interesting to the customers to get deeper into the analysis. Of course, you need to work with the company itself to ask questions, to understand what is the idea of the technology. Is there some working business or not? But for the first idea, for the first understanding, if the company comes to us and we're trying to convince them to order this scouting program, we have to show what we have in store, and the company can evaluate whether they find any value in the scouting program. Speaking of investors, I hope that is going to be useful for the investors as well. We always have this question, the main question for startups: are you looking for investments or not? And through this navigator, you can find a list of companies who are looking for investments. We have the SKOLKOVO program, the support for business angels, where a physical entity is investing into startup and they can receive about 50% of their investment back. But this cannot be over the VAT paid, and we are planning to have this additional service, the informational service, to show the list of the companies which are looking for business angel investments, because business angels are usually coming to invest into a company which they know, which are the residents of SKOLKOVO. And for those who are looking for these investments, we are planning to invest into this process. The way I see it, the topic is developing naturally, and particular services based on it are being created. And then we will see how it goes, who's going to use it, and everything will be adapted to the requirements of the potential users. Thank you. Finally, we came to the main users of the system, investors. Oleg, what do the venture funds expect? What information about the technological companies are going to be useful for you when you're looking for technological companies? Thank you. I think we can distribute this into two parts. On one hand, we're talking about the system giving some classic things to venture funds, the corporate one, the private ones, which are looking for products, services, technologies, in order to include them into their own stacks, because the market is growing and the interests of the finances investors is to get the upside when they're going to sell to the strategist or exit. So, to connect some stack of technologies, to unite them together. And it's important over here to see how the startup moved from one stage to another, whether they were successful in reaching point B from point A when they came to get grants, and they said, I'm going to do this, and then they would use the grant, give the results, so to check whether it's successful or not. So, and over here, we're not talking about anything good or bad. It's good if at some point they do understand that they are coming through going the wrong way. So, and if they are making the so-called pivot, so, and they are developing on, it shows that the team, and in this particular case, the key factor is the team which is capable of bringing this project to the real fruition. And to oversee the companies as they develop is most important, which can be received by the regular investor from this program. So if you're not lucky enough from the very first start, so it's not that bad. Yes, of course, the serial entrepreneur and technological innovator in the Silicon Valley and on the other markets after 40, it doesn't mean that they just came and started doing something. It means that they had 40, 30, 50 unsuccessful cases, but they are not stopping when they're falling down. down. They are just getting up and moving on. And thanks God, we already have this mentality in our community of start-uppers and innovators. People are learning from the mistakes of other people. So in bad cases in your portfolio is good as well. But you shouldn't punish the start-uppers for the bad cases by taking everything from them. I heard from the venture investors that they say the more negative experience you have, the better it is, because the chances are increasing that you are going to be successful next time. Of course, it's true. And I would like to highlight that our colleagues from SKOLKOVO are doing a good job. We have whole accelerators, which are actually based on bad experience and how to avoid it in the future. If this information is going to exist in the system, it's going to be really good. And I think that startuppers are going to use it with great pleasure.
From the perspective of the venture fund and development institution, so that you can put a slash there or a comma, whatever, we have a different idea, a problem, perhaps. How can you account for the funds invested into success of previous stages of development? So, to put it simply, a venture fund normally can have a cash out and normally what they use, but development institutions don't have that opportunity to use this logic because they can develop, but they don't provide money for exit. But in that startup, you have a development institution from the previous stage. It makes sense to buy them from it, and then we can demonstrate the effectiveness of that development institution's contribution at the previous stage. Now we have a gap there. So we cannot say what and how that contribution will be evaluated of my venture fund into that startup that got funds from MTI fund. If Ministry for Economic Development, our colleagues there, those who are involved in legislative activities, if they can help us avoid that gap, that may be a great signal to this society that we need to work on this. This is a topic for a separate session, not only for the Ministry of Economic Development, but for others as well. Yeah, it deserves a separate session. It's an issue of relevance, and we will need to come back to that. Thank you so much. Sergey, I would like to hear from you, your opinion, why corporate investors need this IT system, or maybe they don't need it. So what is important for partners, what they need in that tech project for scouting? Hello, everybody. The good answer contains part of the answer. So scouting was mentioned. So I would say scouting M&A. I will be able to pass the microphone to the next speaker because I have 5 minutes. I will elaborate on this. Understandably, scouting for projects and their evaluation, we, as being a large investor, it's not a trivial task. And we are friends, and we interact with SKOLKOVO Foundation, and among many employees, we have relationships that have lasted for many years, and our institution is not the only one, but to understand the landscape, to start those relationships, it's not a trivial task. You have the same database, the same platform. It's a great help in resolving this issue. But besides identification or scouting, there is a second part, mostly information analysis of existing trends in the market, understanding which technologies are developed, which are not, and we can adapt our own strategy as a result. Maybe we were wrong in sensing that market. Maybe we did not believe in that startup. We see that it's on the way to success and it breaks some stereotypes, and now we need to pay attention to it. So we have the component as well. And speaking of things that are important to see in a project, on our part we provided elaborate commentaries as asked as it was asked, in summary, it's a database of tech startups, and we need to understand particularities of technology. We need to understand how it is different from competitive decisions, what benefit they generate. So what is the essence of the project? And secondly, second point, perhaps it's even more important than the first one. I'd like this. So value offer, value proposal. It kind of sounds like it comes from consulting, but I don't know how to word it better. Oftentimes, projects and startups see differently what the market needs. So in that sense, the availability of a system psychologically resolves this issue, because projects are few, and if a company wants to meaningfully treat that system and for it to work, it should describe its main benefits, advantages shortly and informatively. So to be able to speak the same language on the one hand and also have the same basis for communications. And thirdly, what it's important to see in the platform is financial component, because practice is the criteria of veracity. So this is how we check it. Any model, any technology is verified by the market if it generates revenues, if they have some dynamics. So maybe we should change our opinion and change our perspective. So I think that's about it. So 3:50 was the time I took. So you have a little bit over a second. Can I use that time? So while we were talking about it, I had that idea in my mind. It's popular to create analogs of various services like Google, something similar to Google Store, Apple Store. But for investors, one of the basic services is a pitch book. So if that system becomes, there is a Russian analog to that system, would be real good, but pitch book doesn't work, by the way. So you mean, but Russian pitch book. So it does not exist yet, but the international one doesn't work. So now we have an idea of the kind of result we want to get. Vyacheslav, I would like to pass the mic to you. As I stated in the beginning when I introduced you, it would be nice to hear from you, because you are a co-founder of Syndicat Venture Club, a club of business angels. How business angels find their startups and their initial evaluation, how it can be done on that platform. Thank you for the question. Oleg basically said that thing when he said, if it becomes a prototype of such a base, it would be of great help. And it would be nice for private investments to be reflected there, for development institutions for that to be considered as a criterion during the expert review. Venture investors may believe in that, they invest into it, startups grow, but development institutions don't give grants to that because they think because they have different criteria, and also private investments may be an important criterion for getting grants. So you should treat it carefully, because private investments oftentimes are accompanied by con-time regime. So we don't want to scare the audience with this, but still. So the main criterion is that for a startup, because many startups are ready to demonstrate it, there are strategies. So if parties agreed on that, no problem. So the startup may be ready to disclose it. So with Business Angels, when we prepared for this session, we talked about things that may be helpful for us. So which companies out of those submitted applications for grants? It is important. And here, yesterday, during the pitch session, so if that startup applied for 100 million ruble grant, and we look for a syndicated grant as Business Angels in 20 million of 20 millions. So we understand the company will have 100 million of actual money, of actual cash, and we just add 20 million, so there's a greater probability that the things will work, that a company. So it is helpful for us to have that information. But do companies want others to know how much they get from different funds, foundations? But as they fill out forms, they may disclose that information. So Russian venture should be developed. Just a few words about that. Syndicate Club was started on the basis of Angels Debt Club. So deals were done quickly, and $54 million were attracted. So one deal per month, that was there after a pitch sometimes. So a startup would get some commitments on the same night. So up to $1.5 million. That was the largest amount of money for one same startup. So that base was created to accelerate review of applications. So that was the main benefit from it. And in parallel, if many startups are interested, and they apply for a grant, and also in parallel they look for funding, so they may be interested in disclosing this information. And what is also very important, if possible, and we discussed this with Rustam, about helping innovations. So when we deal with the issue of import substitution, which has a lot of relevance today, it's a hot one. So building a demand or formulating demand to substitute technologies or to resolve a specific issue, a database has that information about those requests. Let's say municipal bodies are interested in that technologies, they need it. So investors would get some help from it. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for thinking about supporting tech startups, about it, thinking about how to accelerate. It's one of the biggest pitches for today. How to get those support? How to get the support? If it's resolved, everybody will be thankful and recognizant. So as part of that. So out of the things which are in demand, it's not like there will be a season of grants, not only once a year when that window is open and then it's closed and you have a 1 week window, and then for the rest of the year it's not available. So you can get really behind in 6 months or in a year. So maybe grants can be issued on a permanent basis, so startups would not be afraid of missing that window of opportunities. I think it would be great. I have one more question. So when it would be put on, when it would come online? So we ideally met the deadline of 45 minutes, but they gave us another 15 minutes. I had that idea towards the end of discussion to have a quick poll of speakers, but I decided not to do it. I will ask to word the things or to reiterate the things that I wrote listening to you, especially with regard to investors who spoke here. Oleg Teplov worded, well-formulated a future image, future idea, future vision of the result, and then success stories and stories of failure are equally important, and also the right for risks. So this is a legal gap that exists, and it should be separately discussed because many venture investors are concerned about it. And when Sergey was speaking, I wrote down analysis of trends in technologies would be important and helpful to see in the system a description of the essence of project and a value proposal also revenues in dynamics, historic track record, to be able to better to see what is happening with the company. As Vyacheslav said, it would be helpful to see those companies that submit applications to different foundations, just to see it, which companies submit them and to what funds, and to get some responses for development funds to know what they are. So investors should be able to see it in the system as well. And two questions. Vyacheslav basically got it before I did. But when the system will be implemented, when it will come online, so that we have a prototype, we keep working on it. So the first demo version, beta version, will become available. And so without providing a specific date, I can say that, and how you can join the system. So I will try to respond to that one. So Rustam, your assessment, how do you plan, when do you plan to implement the system to provide access to investors? So we're moving along with our draft law. The system will be described, support measures and risks, and that should help us to technologically synchronize with the rest of the government bodies from whom we'll be getting the data. And an important information piece will be based on that data. So the process should be completed by the fall in terms of completeness of information that is required by investors. So we closely cooperate with Leonid while testing functionality and verifying the data contents. And we have some examples of that, separate examples, to better understand what data sets are needed by investors to make a decision. Undoubtedly, due diligence is not cancelled by this system. And of course, it will be in the hands of investors and startups how they agree on funding terms. But this zero stage to get samples for investing, this is something that we're going to provide effectively. Thank you so much. So by the end of the year, this fall, Russian pitch book will be available. We have also big bosses that set those deadlines for us, so we have to do it. We'll have to do it. So how can you make it to that system? So in simple words, I can tell you. So all the companies that come to our development institutions will need to join that system. So equally, Russian venture funds, SKOLKOVO Foundation, and other development institutions will be providing information to that system. So for startup information, when they interact with those organizations, will end up in the system. And the last slide, as an example, it's a link. How can you participate in the SKOLKOVO project? So as we agreed, Igor. So colleagues, thank you for this discussion. It was very interesting. We wrote it all down, and we will keep it in mind when we elaborate the system. Thank you, and see you later. Let's thank the participants of the session and its moderator. And we would like to thank dear partners of our conference, so co-organizers of StartPage is the SKOLKOVO Foundation, VEB Ventures, and VEB.RF. Thank you, dear partners. Strategic partner of the conference is Department of Entrepreneurship and Innovative Development of the City of Moscow. Official digital partner is Gazprom Bank, and cybersecurity partner is Rostelecom. Partners MTS, Startup Hub, Roselhozbank, and Moscow Credit Bank. So the program of the main stage will continue shortly, so please don't go away. Thank you for your attention.
тела быстро теряют энергию. Но нахождение вблизи источника тепла позволяет телу получать тепловое излучение. Происходит самопроизвольное перераспределение тепла. Следовательно, когда источники тепла находятся вместе, их энергия побеждает холод. Лучшее создается вместе. Газпромбанк. Но нахождение вблизи источника тепла позволяет телу получать тепловое излучение. Происходит самопроизвольное перераспределение тепла. Следовательно, когда источники тепла находятся вместе, их энергия побеждает холод. Лучшее создается вместе. Газпромбанк.
МТС Стартап Хаб. Работа с реальным бизнес-заказчиком МТС. Доступ к ресурсам самого крупного телеком-бренда в России. Не можешь поверить? А в твой стартап обязательно поверят. У нас есть все, что тебе понадобится. Ресурсы, клиенты, технологии, каналы продаж. Мы оценим твой продукт, правильно применим в своем бизнесе и масштабируем на мировой рынок. МТС Стартап Хаб ждет тебя и твоих нереальных бизнес-идей.
Я верю, что сама выбираю, какой я буду завтра. Я могу выбрать быть сильнее, быстрее, легче, а могу проиграть. Но меня это не остановит. Мой выбор — уверенно двигаться к своей цели.